Grateful that you're all here with us. Incredibly grateful that we have these three pharmacy consultants up with us this afternoon. So, again, Eric Duplacar, Vice President of Business Development with Employers Health. And I've had the privilege of knowing and working with all three of these pharmacy consultants. And so I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves, just give some background, share a little bit more about how you work with clients, the type of client that you work with, I think would be great.
I'm Kim Commissar. I'm Vice President and Lead Consultant at Lockton Companies with the Excelsior Division focused on pharmacy. I support clients that range in size from about 2 to 15,000 typically. Also support health plans in addition to employers. And I cover clients that are in New York all the way to California and a little bit of everything in between. A little bit on my background, prior to becoming a consultant with Lockton, I actually ran and managed a group purchasing organization for pharmacy. I also worked at a PBM, and then I sat in many of your seats for most of my career where I was an HR director. So a little bit of everything.
Thank you.
Mike Zuccarelli, pharmacist by training. I serve as CBiz's National Pharmacy Practice Lead, probably a similar client demographic to Kim. Humbled to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the panel.
Chris Brown, and I'll keep mine short like Mike. If you want to read my bio, it's in that booklet we have, so I won't say much. I do want to say one thing, though. There are multiple PBMs, 2 PBMs, and 8 drug companies who are sponsors of the event today. My experience with those firms has always been the frontline people are nice, they are wonderful, they are people. So when I tick you off by some of the things that I say about your organizations, please do not take it personally. It's more about your management, not you. So,
Starting with the disclaimer.
well, I just
coming in
felt
hot.
like I needed to get that out there because part of the reason Eric invited me is I work for myself. That means if I think I want to say it, I can. I don't have to pre-vet my talking points. So
We're going to make PBM really fun
Here
today
we
for
go.
everyone. Here we go.
well,
Buckle
it's the
up.
last session of the day. I mean,
That's
come
right.
on.
So thank you for those quick intros. So Josh and his panel, thank you again to the employers that came up on the previous panel. They teased up some pharmacy topics. Let me ask the crowd, what do you think the first one I'm going to ask about is? You would be correct. GLP-1s and weight loss. And again, the panel before us talked a little bit about this, but obviously we have some different perspectives with our consultant friends here with you. So let's begin with that topic. So plan sponsors obviously are all trying to figure out the best way to approach weight loss. So the overarching question is, how are your clients managing weight loss? And what strategies do you think plan sponsors should consider? So Kim, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I think it makes it a little challenging in that all the direct-to-consumer marketing, I mean, you guys already knew it'd be a topic. You can't say Ozempic without having the little jingle pop in your head. So extra credit if you guys want to sing it. Thank you. Okay. You got, okay.
You got paid for that.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
I like yellow. What can I say?
We didn't even prepare that. That was nice. So on the diabetes side, and I think, we heard others mention it here, but making sure people have their utilization management in place or smart edits that many of the PBMs have in partnership with organizations like Employers Health, but to make sure not to restrict members from getting the medication if they need it, because we're in a great time where we have medications that are more effective than ever. But you want to make sure the right patient is getting it at the right time. And we've already seen supply issues previously, so ensuring those members get it that truly need it. So that on the diabetes side. And then on the weight loss side, it's a bit of a challenge. I think someone else said it. We're seeing the same thing in our data. Anywhere between 50 to 60% are covering at this time. However, the tricky thing is that we're seeing in our data is that about 2/3 of the people that go on a weight loss GLP-1 discontinue the medication. And then within about 11 months, they gain the weight back. So I think we heard people like Candace and Missy talk about having programs or like lifestyle things. That's so critical to making sure if you invest in your employees around those medications, that you're not just looking at the drug as a silver bullet. What is the program you're encompassing around your employee to make sure that they have diet, lifestyle to support them moving forward.
Chris, same question.
Well, my advice is fairly simple for my employer clients, which is don't cover the drugs right now. You look at a disease, if you want to treat overweight as a disease, if you're a healthy young population, you'll have 30% of your members that could qualify for these medications. In the US, it would be more like 40 or 50% if you're going to go down below a 30 BMI and use a comorbidity. That's not a sustainable group. And so if you're covering it for some, guess what happens? People say, oh my gosh, you look great. What happened? Oh, I got put on Zepbound. I lost 25 pounds, generating more prescriptions. And unlike almost every other drug, like all of us believe in consumer-directed healthcare, but how many of you take a disease off of your health plan because you don't want to pay for the drug? Weight loss medications straddle this line where some people go out and buy them for themselves, and the price is one and lower, and when employers pay for it, the price is higher. So let's put some price pressure on these medications. Now, having said that, Kim was right. I mean, Zepbound and Mounjaro, they are the exact same thing. So if you shut down Zepbound and do nothing about Mounjaro, you haven't really solved a problem. So you need clinical edits in. And what I'm talking to my clients about is looking into those edits. Look at the smart PAs, because most PBMs have them. Make sure the logic of who is a diabetic actually should bypass the PA. What's the criteria? Because just saying we bypass the PA because the person's a diabetic, look at what qualifies for that. Is it one script for metformin and then the person can get Ozempic? That's really not a strong criteria.
Thank you.
By the way, I'm not a pharmacist, so sometimes when I sound like I'm talking about all these things,
Yeah,
I don't
myself.
want Mike to reach over and slug me because I did not go to pharmacy school.
Mike, as a pharmacist,
Yeah, there.
So I haven't seen Chris in years, and we didn't prep for this, but I agree with everything he said. I don't think this is a long-term sustainable solution. I'm probably a little anti-narrative from a clinical standpoint on this. I do think the drugs provide some benefit for the right patients, but I view it more as a catalyst to get them to where they need to be. And I'm a huge advocate of overall wellness, having a healthy body, having healthy mind, eating healthy, and really using these drugs as a catalyst to get into a better place physically. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Mike. Okay, so do you see many of your clients, Mike, not covering weight loss based on a
I'd say,
recommendation that you would make?
I'd say it's about 50-50. So a lot of the fully insured plans still don't cover weight loss in certain markets. And similar to Chris, for the clients that are not covering weight loss medications today, we're advising those clients to stay the course and not cover them. I've encouraged clients to really push their vendors to look at those prior authorization criteria as well. And just recently, our team, and I would encourage any plan sponsors in the room to do the same, look at your data from 2022 and then look at it 2023 and try to pick out your diabetic members. And I think what we're beginning to see is this odd increase in diabetic members, which could be one of two things. Either people really are dodging the system and getting these medications that they shouldn't. That would be one extreme, complete insurance fraud. The other extreme could be something more along the lines of what we saw with hepatitis C. We see increased awareness, increased testing, and maybe this is a good thing. I'm not going to come out and say that we know definitively it's either one of those extremes. It's probably something in the middle. I look at the GLP-1 drug spend in total. To me, it's metabolic disease, whether it's Wegovy or Ozempic, it's all one and the same. And that's the PMPM that I've really been tracking for our clients.
Great, thank you. And by the way, I should have mentioned this up front. We'll have time for questions at the end. So if you have one that's burning, certainly you can interrupt us, but we'll certainly have time at the end. Okay, try to guess the second question I'm going to ask. What would be the topic? Oh, close. That's number 3. Biosimilars is the second one on our list here. Okay, so obviously a big market event that's incredibly important for plan sponsors. Josh and his panel talked about it a little bit, but obviously the Humira biosimilar being the major topic. So curious on the team's thoughts on how, from a formulary perspective, your perspective on how these PBMs are handling the Humira biosimilar. I'm going to butcher the name here, Hyrimoz. What do you think?
Good enough.
Pretty good. So obviously, CVS made the decision to cover Hyrimoz and exclude Humira on its standard formulary. So ESI and Optum, of course, two of the other big three, have biosimilars at parity with Humira. So let's begin with you, Mike. What's your take on the formulary strategies that the PBMs have taken so far?
So you've summed up two of them. I think on one extreme, we've seen some PBMs, and I won't rattle off vendor names up here, but there's some PBMs that have taken the extreme approach of completely excluding the innovator products and even excluding some of the high-cost biosimilars and promoting the lowest of low cost. To the other extreme of putting them at parity or sometimes even continuing to prefer the innovator products. Again, there's financial and clinical reasons to do this. One topic that I like to bring up in client conversations, first off, we're kind of stuck with our PBM in many cases of what formulary that they're going to dictate or the flavor of formularies that we can take. But if we think back to other innovative big blockbuster drugs like Lipitor, Prozac, if we could go back in time and change the way that we behaved when those drugs went generic, I think we'd probably take, we being the plan sponsor, would probably take the approach more like the first example I gave. We now have free market competition here. Let's get rid of the innovator product. I've even heard rumblings in the consultant community. I don't have any clients that have done this, but even taking it one step farther and not only excluding just Humira, but even excluding some of the other innovator products that don't have a biosimilar. I think you could get a lot of clinicians in the room and get a lot of opinions together, but I think you could make a fairly strong clinical case to promote a generics only within this particular class.
Can I jump on something? Mike
Absolutely.
said? And this was something I was going to bring up anyway, but it dovetails right into what Mike said. So I worked at ESI back in the day. And when I came on board, Lipitor was the kind of the Humira of its time, #1 drug at the time, most successful. And during my first months there, ESI was making a big point about, hey, we took on Pfizer, we took Lipitor off our formulary, we put Zocor on our formulary. And you know why we did that, Ms. Plan Sponsor? In July, it's going to go generic, and we want all your people teed up on this drug so they can switch over. What big PBM did that for Humira? Zero. None of them said, let's get people on Humira, let's get them off Skyrizi, let's get them off Stelara, let's get them on Humira so when there's a biosimilar and we can drive to lowest net cost, real lowest net cost, they didn't. So to me, it's pretty good evidentiary support that rebates are so big that they have a huge impact on how formularies are drawn. Now, what I hear is that, hey, we left Humira at parity because if we didn't have Humira, we would lose rebates on Skyrizi and Rinvoq. Well, that was AbbVie's playbook. I mean, find alternative drugs and kick those both off. So, I mean, I'm a big evangelist for where I think Mike was saying, maybe we should be driving to the lowest cost product, not a biosimilar that has a rebate. Let's pick the Amjevita that's 55% off, not 5%. And yet I can't change that nationally, but why I'm up here on this stage is that I can change that for plan sponsors. I can use what I've learned in 25 years, helping them make smart decisions. And then maybe when clients make changes, people will respond. And given that I'm talking about the big PBMs, I want to pay some respect to Employers Health, and then I'll shut up here. I don't mean to monopolize. But, I feel good when I get a contract from CVS or Optum that comes through Employers Health because they're watching out for you. Their CEO's here. The CEO of Optum's not here. So it isn't that the big PBMs do nothing good. It's that they need pressure put on them to behave well. So.
Nice plug. Yes, thank you. So very good. Thank you. Thank you both for your commentary so far. Kim, so question for you. What kind of uptake do you think the biosimilars will receive when they're at parity with Humira?
I think without a more extreme move like what CVS has taken, I can't imagine that it would have a large impact. Maybe there would be some small residual impact because this is such a newsworthy drug. And again, just like Ozempic, you can't turn on the TV without seeing some kind of a commercial for Stelara, Skyrizi, or Invoke. But, aside from that, without the motivation from a cost perspective, steering with formulary, I just don't think that we'd see a shift.
And Chris, should plan sponsors expect to see savings from biosimilars, or do you think it's going to be a net neutral because of the rebate offsets or the rebate credits?
Savings, ultimately. Can I demonstrate that? Can a PBM say to you, with all the rebates on these other drugs, we think the net cost of Humira is lower? And I don't think any of us could disprove that because we can't see all of the contracts. But that claim rests on the fact that negotiating behind the scenes sets a lower price than the free market, and I just don't buy that. So I would feel better for my plan sponsors to get a lower price at the counter that their member can benefit from, that people can see. That's going to drive lowest net cost, in my opinion.
And last question when it comes to the Humira biosimilar. So are there other things that employers should be thinking about just generally within this category? Any other advice that you would give a plan sponsor?
Are you asking me?
Any of you.
Oh, yeah, go to Mike on that one first.
Mike?
I think I already gave mine to begin with, just putting that positive pressure on your current vendor partners and asking a lot of questions. Because I think if we don't speak up, we basically get what we're handed. We're going to get the formularies that are dictated onto us. And I think we need to start asking those hard questions and having our vendor partners respond to them.
I agree. And to Chris's point, we're already seeing the shifts. It's like, oh, Humira is going down. It's like, no, they're going on to a different medication in the same class. It's still a brand drug.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, next topic. Copay assistance programs and foundational dollars. So obviously these are available. We heard about Prudent RX in the last panel. Available to all plan sponsors and participants to help the cost of expensive specialty drugs. There are a handful of solutions from the big PBMs. Some of the mid markets have their own solutions as well to take advantage and capture that manufacturer copay assistance. And there are other programs to not cover specialty drugs at all and steer participants to things like foundational support. So, Chris, we'll start with you. What solutions either manufacturer copay maximization programs or foundational funding are you seeing work in the marketplace?
So most of my clients are not doing patient assistance programs and foundational dollars. They're large enough that they just don't want to go down that route. And I get if you're an employer that has one cystic fibrosis patient, and if you can take them off the liability for your plan, you're going to save 75% of your drug spend. That probably is irresistible to you. But if you're larger, I think the idea of taking charitable dollars and reallocating to your plan presents some, at least might make you think. Copay assistance programs, why the hell wouldn't you take advantage of those dollars? Members are using these coupons already. Do you think, what happens when you call a specialty pharmacy? Oh, your copay is $3,000 because you're in a high deductible. Would you be interested in the coupon for that? Who the heck says no? Of course you do. So if the member's going to be using the copay card and the dollars to get around your plan design, which you built, you might as well get the extra money for the plan because you're not changing incentives.
Thank you. And Kim, question for you. What's your perspective on how some of the third-party copay assistance programs impact the member experience? And how have you seen the foundational type program impact the member experience?
So I am with Chris on this. Like, why wouldn't you do the copay assistance? But then on the flip side, and I do have a couple that have the foundational, and I get it. You get one Trikafta member, your plan blows up, you can't make salary. You got to do what you got to do. But in general, I think it's just a gray area that I'm personally not particularly comfortable with. Of course, talk to your compliance and lawyer if you need to look at it. But if you're asking an employee, basically thinking of the experience that they have to go through to get that foundational assistance, they have to go work with that company. They have to fill something out saying they're basically underinsured. This isn't covered with my company's insurance. They fill out paperwork saying what their salary is to make sure they qualify. So basically also saying I don't make enough money. It just feels to me like it's not the best experience for that particular member, and about their role that they have.
Very good, thank you. And Mike, do you see the foundational support and alternative funding as a sustainable solution?
I don't think this is a sustainable solution at all. I actually think this whole mousetrap that has been created is absolutely ridiculous. So let's not kid ourselves. All this money has been priced into the original cost of the drug anyways. So to have members and plan sponsors jump through hoops to secure a rebate that's basically a refund for an overcharge of the medication just doesn't make sense. But unfortunately, I think what also is not sustainable is the fact that every time we have a new drug come to market, it almost always comes at a higher cost. So I feel like most industries, some innovation can gain a larger price, but in many industries, sometimes once we innovate, we can actually do something better, faster, cheaper, and the price should actually decrease. So whatever the next multiple sclerosis drug that comes out, my hope is that, I don't know if this is pharma figuring this out or our politicians figuring it out, but we need that curve to go the other way. And then we can stop playing the games around rebates, coupons, and create a more sustainable drug market for the average consumer and the plan sponsors that are funding this benefit.
Very good, thank you. So any other comments on that topic? Otherwise, we'll move on. Chris?
I had one, but it's not as salient, so I'll just.
Okay.
Catch them after.
You can talk to Chris after this panel. If you want some honest.
Censored himself.
Yes. If you want some honesty. No, all good. All good. So, okay, number 4 on the list here, gene therapies. We've heard a little bit about these already. Some of these are already in the market. We know that there's others in the pipeline. In some cases, these are million-dollar drugs, which we, again, heard about earlier. And of course, today, these are falling under the medical benefit, so they're not under the pharmacy benefit today. And of course, for good reason, purchasers of healthcare are concerned with how to pay for these. So, Chris, I'll start with you. How should plan sponsors prepare as more of these come to market?
Shocking no one who heard my question earlier with, was it Ryan from Aegis? They're a stop-loss issue. They're a one-and-done black swan event, and I'm not an underwriter, so I get more coming, but they're not driven by rebates. You're not going to manage them through procurement. You've got to have a stop-loss contract that covers these things. Having said that, the one that I'm sort of watching, and I'm going to need Mike's help, in December we had 2 drugs come out for 2 gene therapies for sickle cell, and that's the first time I've seen 2 gene therapies attacking the same disease. Well, that's in the drug world, that's when you can start to pit them against each other and negotiate something. When it's Roctavian and there's no other treatment, what's your leverage? So maybe at some point they will become more of a procurement issue if there's more than one available. But right now, make sure your stop loss is up to snuff.
Kim, and any thoughts on what plan sponsors should be doing to prepare?
So we work with stop loss and our medical benefits teams to support our clients that we get all the data in-house and run. I think somebody else mentioned it, doing a project for it, but we'll regularly come up with models for like sickle cell anemia, what's an age, the risk, how severe is it, and then make sure we share that with our team so that they can take it into consideration, like, hey, you might be at risk for X number of people that could qualify for this. So just so they can consider it in their modeling.
Got it, very good. And Mike, what solutions, can you talk about some solutions that are currently in the market, and how do you see PBMs and health plans handling these in the future?
As far as gene therapy,
As far as gene therapy.
I mean, I think it's really just the basic blocking and tackling, making sure that the right patients are getting these drugs. And I think the stop-loss expert mentioned that earlier. I'd like to hope and think that the facilities that are administering these medications, the doctors that are writing for them, understand the gravity of them, and this isn't something we're just flippantly giving to people. I do agree that this is a stop-loss issue and a funding of risk issue, and I think the only ask and hope I'd make to the pharma folks in the audience is to try your best to hold yourself and your product accountable for the long term. And I think that's the unknown, as we don't know the durability of these medicines. So when we see, I think the example was given, Roctavian, if we're spending $1 million a year on Factor, sure, I'll spend $3 million if I have this durable therapy that I won't need that ongoing factor. But if we find out that that expires in 4 or 5 years and the patient needs a retreat of the gene therapy, that's a problem. I can't think of too many people that would invest in a $3 million house knowing that it's going to burn to the ground in 3 years and be ineffective. When we're commanding this much money for a product, there should be some sort of warranty on it, which again is tough to do in a plan sponsor arrangement. If I'm on my company's health plan, they pay for it, then I jump to another employer, who's getting the refund? How does that work? But I think all of us as stakeholders need to come together and find a more long-term solution for paying for these drugs.
Have any of the health plans put together a warranty type model?
I've heard rumor that they exist. I've never actually seen a written signed contract of what they look like.
Very good. So next topic, state and federal legislation. So plan sponsors, of course, are now faced with state legislation that has and will continue to change the way that plan sponsors purchase and manage pharmacy. So from things like anti-steerage laws to transparent pricing requirements to not allowing programs like exclusive specialty providers. These are all impacting the pricing and the value and the experience for plan sponsors and participants. So first question on state and federal legislation. Mike, who ultimately is supposed to benefit from these laws?
So
Supposed to?
who's supposed to? Or
Who's supposed to, and then who is benefiting?
Yeah, I think it depends on who we're talking about here. If you were to see the way these laws are advertised in the various state, the patients are supposed to be benefited. So it's all about patient access, patient choice. These big bad PBMs are sending people to their networks and their retail pharmacies, and this is a problem. We need to open this up to the patient. That's what you hear. Who ultimately benefits from this, I would say, are the less than efficient pharmacies in a network. And I almost view a lot of these laws as a way for people to legislate their businesses into a long-term existence. And the example I've sometimes given to clients is this feels a lot like Blockbuster. When Netflix came out and Amazon came out and streaming services came out, the product was no longer relevant. And this is coming from a pharmacist, trust me. Like when I was in pharmacy school, I wanted to own my own pharmacy. We live in a world now where I'm sure there are some examples where a small mom and pop pharmacy needs to exist in a certain market. But people are so accustomed to buying their things online, getting things shipped to them that day. I can order something now and it's at my doorstep at 7 o'clock tonight. The world has changed. So to me, these laws, I feel like, are promoting some market inefficiencies, which ultimately come at the cost of you all, the plan sponsors. So.
Very good. And Chris, question for you. How do you see this playing out from an ERISA preemption perspective?
Well, I need to respond to Mike first.
Go ahead, please do.
It's our first fight up here on stage. I see it. I've worked at pharmacies a couple of different times, and in fact, in Oregon, I lobbied for some PBM reform back about 10 years ago. And where I get challenged by Mike is that the battleground is not so much on expensive brand drugs. The battleground is on cheap generics, where if you're a small independent pharmacy, you will have multiple cases where you get paid less than your cost of the drug, and that's what you get reimbursed by the PBM. or slightly more, and then months later they claw back that money. So if a pharmacy needs $10 or $12 to fill a script profitably, and that keeps their doors open and keeps a healthcare provider in a community, in a small town where there may be none if they close, that's valuable. And that's not what's driving our costs. So, while the steerage stuff, I think there's good reasons not to steer your drugs to the specialty pharmacy of the PBM. We can talk about discounts on generic specialty drugs, but, letting people have mail service, letting that choice, but putting some kind of a floor on the generics at retail, like I could be convinced, in fact, I am convinced that's probably worth a little bit extra.
We can be
And
friends
the
and
ERISA
we can be friends and disagree. So
Right, yeah.
My
It's friendly.
only rebuttal statement to that, I actually fully agree with what Chris says, and it's painful to see this industry die. But if we're going to point the finger at any bad guy, I tend to point the finger at Walmart, your large big box retailers that have effectively commoditized pharmacy. They're the first ones that came out and said, we'll fill it for $4.
Yeah.
Go shop for your stuff around the store. And we've taken healthcare and minimized it to buying Q-tips. And it is very unfortunate because these pharmacists that are filling this and the staff and the bottles, I mean, just the time that's put into that costs them more than $4
And
to
the
put in.
counseling, it's just, and part of this comes from, I saw it was a conference a couple of weeks ago, and one was talking about, in rural areas where there isn't a hospital close by, and to lose the pharmacy in the town is just one more place where hard to access care. But on the preemption, I think anything that has to do with reimbursement, that's going to survive ERISA preemption. If it's plan design, I'm not an attorney, by the way, not a pharmacist, not an attorney. I don't see how the plan design laws don't get preempted by ERISA. So I'm not paying attention to those. And Washington, I don't think anything's going to happen there. I'm getting more and more confident of that every single day.
very good. And Kim, what's your general advice to plan sponsors and your clients in terms of just in terms of watching what's going on in these states, right? So what would be your advice to clients in regard to how do they stay up on these things?
I think from a state perspective, I do think some of the PBMs do a great job of keeping you updated, but of course you need to work with your compliance, your consultants, as things change with networks, and if you have to narrow things up, or if they, open things up for specialty and you're able to go to any willing provider. Then more broadly, just keeping an eye on doing your own due diligence on your plan. Are you evaluating the programs regularly? Are you looking at different formularies? Are you looking at utilization management, or even just doing market analysis? I mean, I don't know that it's where it's going to go, but the J&J case is something that I have a client asking me about almost every other day. And I think too, it's a good position, even just to give you guys a little bit of a nod here, that a thing mentioned in there is the conflict between the consultant-led coalitions versus being in an employer-led coalition, and making sure that you have that independence or not that conflicted view on your pharmacy arrangement.
None of my friends are on the payroll at Employers Health on the panel here.
We don't have a coalition, so I'm just saying.
So, so then, there are states that have put in some of the anti-steerage legislation. Have the PBMs done things to get around that? Because I believe they have, right? Can you share any thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, PBMs are in general really, really good at the fine print. It's kind of in every single contract they have an employer sign. And the one that I'm aware of wasn't it the single, I want to say it was in Kentucky, it was the single pharmacy. And if they're the only if the PBM owns the pharmacy, you can't limit. So they went out and contracted with another one. So now suddenly it's not only the specialty pharmacy, and it's this other guy over here too. So defeating the purpose of the law but honoring, well, no, that's right.
Very good. Okay, next topic, as I'm looking at the time right now. So Pricing benchmarks. These are also in the headlines. As you're Googling PBM, you'll probably see something about the different pricing models out there. So cost plus models, NADAC pricing, and AWP are all benchmarks used to evaluate PBM contracts. Traditionally, some more common than others, like AWP is more common than the other two. Things like Mark Cuban's cost plus drugs have shaken up the market a bit, specifically on generics. And now even the larger PBMs have announced the availability of cost plus pricing.
Cost-ish plus.
Cost-ish.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
Technical term.
How do you define cost? So question for all three of you, and whoever wants to, this is an open question. How do you present these pricing options to employer clients and plan sponsors?
Oh, you guys are looking at me.
You can start.
Well, sure. So CapRx is the one who does NADAC, and I've worked with other PBMs that the more pass-through model, so it's a little more like the drug cost plus administration fee. And what I try and do, and I think I will not speak for the folks up here on the stage, but I think in general, we're trying to give clients actionable information that's right on what the plan will experience. And so just as an example, if you get a PMPM pricing guarantee because it's based off of cost, and that's for a client, maybe their contract goes live 2025, and I'm repricing claims from a traditional PBM with discounts and rebates on what happened last year, you've got to apply trend because drugs are going to cost more next year, and the guaranteed discount off of drugs that cost more, it's not fair to stack that up. So it's really trying to get to the cost piece. And it's easy to say up here. It is really freaking hard to do because the future is uncertain. But that's really what we want to bring to clients, is that kind of information if we can.
And we chuckled about cost-ish, and just to take this one level deeper into the weeds for the folks that might not see or touch this stuff every day, our organization CBIZ actually has a company within our company that is contracted with Centers for Medicaid, Medicare to set the NADAC rates. So my own colleagues within my company do this on behalf of the government, which is a nice phone a friend.
That's handy, yeah.
And they're published, so anybody can Google and pull down these rates. So that's the nice thing about AAC, but I think what people don't recognize is that when we use the term actual cost or cost plus, a lot of these are mathematical averages. So I don't know what the cost is on the Walgreens right around the corner. It's done via surveys in a particular state to set a rate at the fourth decimal point plus a reasonable dispensing fee within that state. But it's not the actual cost. And I try to remind people of that. There's still margin built into these at some factor. So to answer your question about how do we advise clients, we have to be going at this in a very objective way. And it's very easy for a vendor, and I was trying not to pick on vendors, but you're just all out there. I like it.
I mean, we're up here for our clients, and I'm not trying to hurt, we're not hurting anybody's feelings, but we got to give them a good deal.
Absolutely. They will cherry pick the drugs where they know that the larger PBMs MAC rates are very high. So, hey, you spent $200 per unit for this drug under this big bad PBM, and we would have bought it for 75 cents. Look at how much money you would have saved. But the part they're missing, and I mentioned it earlier, $4 Walmart drugs. Yes, you might buy those drugs at 0.0251 cents per tablet, but then I'm paying an $11 dispensing fee and I'm paying a $9 administrative fee to the PBM. My costs went up huge. And that's 80+ % of my drug claims are these cheap generics that I'm now overpaying for. I would venture for most plan sponsors, if you went down this analytic exercise, at best, you'd find that actual acquisition or NADAC pricing brings you neutral to where you're at today at best. And I've had a tough time seeing where it actually saves clients money.
Kim, any thoughts or comments?
I agree. In our analysis, we see that it looks pretty level. I would be curious that some of the things we've seen in the data is that over time is that the NADAC has not trended up as much as AWP. So something to think about. But I think to your point, Chris, on the PMPMs, you have to keep a close eye that they offer those PMPMs and it sounds great, but then there's all kinds of fine print in there where they're like, well, here's the PMPM, but if your utilization changes or this happens or your population, and so you just have to make sure you're looking at those types of things when you get those offers with different pricing models. Or we'll look at it for you.
For sure.
Very, very good. Any other comments on that?
I'm tempted, but I'm going to.
Go ahead. We have time.
Well, I actually, I would not be surprised, to Mike's point, that if you net out all of the changes, you get close to parity between AWP and NADAC. But the reason I was potentially holding the comment was it has to do with the J&J lawsuit. And I know there's somebody from J&J here, or at least they were sponsor. So the problem with that $200 drug that costs 75 cents, what if you're that member who's paying $200 and you find out you could have paid $3? And I colloquially call this, we rip off the other guy and pass the savings on to you, except in this case, you're the other guy getting ripped off. I would feel better if every claim was closer to the price of the drug versus a massive freaking overcharge on a drug that's indefensible to me, really, even though it nets out to equal. I would rather have that price be close and have that other person pay close to the price. So it's not so, I mean, it can be about the dollars, but also how do you get to that point, you know? And when there's a huge freaking spread on a generic, like some of them that are in specialty, and that's what the J&J claims about, well, who's your specialty pharmacy? Probably the PBM you hired, and they're making that giant spread. So it just makes it ugly. You know, how do you look that member in the eye and say, yeah, I forced you to go to the specialty pharmacy and you massively overpaid, but for our plan, it's a good deal. Like, that's not a conversation I want to have.
And I think this dovetails even to the prior conversation that we were mentioning about formulary. I think you could say the same with the anti-inflammatory class and the cheapest drug now, Yusimary. So why do we have a PBM that has a formulary that's promoting the $8,000 drug when my member could have gotten it for $1,000? And I'm sure there's a great response to couch that, but it's very similar.
Do you think the price variability with a lot of these, products is the reason that's the larger players in the market are trying to, or presenting these cost plus models?
Yeah. I mean, guess where Mark Cuban was yesterday? He was at the White House. He's not a drug guy. He's got a great brand name, but I'm sure he saw somebody said, look, here's a drug that health plans are paying $1,200, and Mark, you can go down to the pharmacy and buy it for $50. And pardon me, he was probably like, WTF? How does that even happen? And with Mark, he wouldn't have said WTF. So he's a billionaire. So he goes and gets a pharmacy, and like, who could blame them? I'm in this business all the time, and I bet Mike and Kim have this. You start talking to someone at a cocktail party, and you're telling them a little bit how things work, and they scratch their head. They go, why is it like that? And you just kind of have to shrug, But
And let's not kid ourselves. I mean, I think the headline that we saw this morning about Mark Cuban being at the White House, I mean, it even says Mark Cuban, billionaire investor.
Yeah.
So let's not kid ourselves that this is a Shark Tank opportunity for him. He's he's seen the gold mine of the PBM area. This isn't all about bringing cheaper drugs to consumer. He's getting his hand in the pot too, and good for him.
Very good. Well, thank you for all of that. So, last general question from me. So, it's pretty open-ended here. What do you see happening in the marketplace that you think could really impact the purchasing of pharmacy moving forward? If you had to name one or two things happening out there.
was that on the list you sent me?
Didn't read it.
Do you have 5 answers, Chris? Is that why you're struggling?
I don't have any answers. I got to think about something.
I think the one that I don't want to say keeps me up at night, like I'm paranoid about this, but it's the topic we just talked about, where you see the exposure of everything we're talking about here within this room, and everybody here is a stakeholder at some point. You all get it. But the average person walking around has no idea. And we're starting to see a heightened awareness in the lay community. You're starting to see this become a very overt battle between some of these large stakeholders and politicians. And when I saw the Johnson & Johnson suit, that was the first time our clients were being attacked. And in that lawsuit, also the consultant. So while I was still practicing pharmacy, and one thing that I've really advised our team on is taking great notes. We can make decisions, we can run RFPs, we can make good decisions. And I have some clients that, I mean, we have board meetings and minutes and things are recorded. And I have other meetings where I'm walking down the hall to the bathroom with the CFO and he makes his decision while we're walking on a 5-minute conversation.
Yep.
But those decisions and the things leading up to those decisions, I really do think need to be documented of why you did what you did. And no decision is going to be perfect, right? There's going to be some follies, but the fact that we've thought through it, we've made a prudent decision at that time for our organization. I'm doubling down on what I've told my team in ensuring that we stay biased or unbiased, and that we stay at a point where we're not accepting remuneration from any vendors to place business, which I think was also brought up in the lawsuit.
Was. And rebates, which was, that was delicious.
Yeah, I mean, it's all out there now. And really our plan sponsors and consultant peers, we all need to be very careful on those decisions we make and the notes that we take around why we made those decisions.
I agree.
Kim, any additional thoughts?
I like that. The other things I would add are, I think about the upcoming price negotiations in the regulated market space. It's like we saw a positive impact on insulin, which was great, although came with some rebate adjustments, but ultimately great news for the member, lower cost insulin. Well, we have 10 more drugs coming in the next couple of years. It's the cost of the drugs aren't just going to shift down without the cost impact maybe going somewhere else. So just really starting to get out ahead of that now and starting to think about how is the negotiation of those 10 drugs potentially going to positively or negatively impact the commercial space.
Chris,
What was the precise question again? I mean, I have an answer, but I want to.
Anything great?
what do you see happening in the marketplace that you think
yeah,
could
yeah.
really impact purchasing pharmacy moving forward?
This is something I don't have the answer for, by the way, but it's something I chew on a lot, which is, and Mike mentioned early on that the launch price of drugs continues to go up and up. And, in 2022, it was $220,000 a year for new, that was the median, by the way, not the average. And last year, I think it was $330,000 if you took out vaccines and stuff. So with that, why is that happening? Well, last year, half the drugs were for orphan conditions, so it was a very small population. There's a lot of orphan conditions. And when a drug is $500,000 or $600,000, it becomes a lot more, well, I'm sure it pencils out more to develop cures. And I'm going to say it was a JAMA study in 16, but if you stack up all the orphan conditions, it's like 1 in 10 people. So as more of these drugs come out, it's a challenge because they might be the only thing in the market, and if we get a new drug for weight loss, which we're all hoping, suddenly we can pit them against each other. But when there's only one, I mean, what the heck are you going to do? So with that terrifying thought, I'll stop.
The other thing I'd leave folks with from a plan sponsor perspective, I mentioned it earlier, but I think we all need to speak up. And whether it's about these state laws and getting involved at a local political level on some of these things and holding your vendor partners accountable, I assume there's obviously employers' health clients in the room. We collectively lean on employers' health as a voice to the PBMs, as a voice to pharma. But I think what keeps me up at night is the fact that we continue to see these costs escalate. And all of us at some point, everybody has a different organization that you work for, different margins, different financial crosshairs that we're looking at for 2024 and 2025. Some might be in more dire straits than others, but if the cost of these medications continues to go down, we're all going to be staring down the barrel of effectively a non-sustainable benefit. And then we're going to have to jump to doing these draconian things like not covering drugs for patients. again, I think this is a we problem that we all need to get around, but I would encourage plan sponsors to speak up, whether it's at the local, state level, or through your vendor partners.
Great. So we have a little over 10 minutes left for some Q&A. So we'd love to hear your questions on any of the topics we discussed or any new topics that we didn't cover over the last 45 minutes.
I am shocked. Oh, we do have a question.
We've got a question.
It's coming to you.
Yeah, my name is Corey Belkin with Genentech, and I'm a recovering benefit consultant. So just to preface that a little bit, I guess I have a question and a comment. The question is, as it relates to the J&J lawsuit, and I think, Mike, you did a pretty good job of going through some of the compliance risk and how you document everything. I'm just trying to understand net what you see from a plan sponsor perspective as far as management of, let's say, just on the pharmacy side of, pharmacy, specialty drugs, because you read through that lawsuit and you think, one of the takeaways could be that, at least with J&J, maybe they should have managed a little bit more effectively, more aggressively. So that's just kind of my first question.
Yeah, it's tough. And Chris brought up, the specialty generics that were really at play. Again, the lawyers cherry picked the one claim in there that looks absolutely.
Well, that's why they cherry picked the plaintiff who had that claim. I mean, it was perfect.
Exactly. And I'm sure all of us, plan sponsors in the room and consultants here, we all have clients that are dealing with the same thing. And frankly, the responsibility of that is on the PBM to manage those rates, the MAC rates, where they're being filled. And we're effectively ceding some of that responsibility and fiduciary responsibility to that PBM, many of which will not take legal fiduciary responsibility for. Most. But yeah, it's a whole new world from a plan sponsor standpoint, because again, these decisions, another thing I remind my clients of is you are running a health plan. Like, we need to take this seriously. That SPD document effectively is your legal binding document of how the plan is supposed to operate. And we can't just be thinking about these benefit meetings as just something that we pass on and move forward. We really need to run this like a health plan. So what the solution is, I don't have a clear answer, but I think given the tools that we all have within these meetings with our vendor partners and our consultants, I just keep going back to documenting, here's the data we were giving, here's the decisions we made based on that data, and let's make sure that we're making the best decision for our membership in the plan.
And one quick comment too on, that's super helpful, by the way, regarding launch prices. And you assured me there's no media here, is that correct? Okay. But as it relates to, launch prices, one thing I would say from our perspective at Genentech, we rolled out an MS drug, 25% lower than the current therapies that were out there, clinically superior. This is about 6 years ago. We did that within the hemophilia class, 50% lower than you gave the $1 million example of the factor example. But I would say from a PBM health plan perspective, it's not as if they, roll out the red carpet when you do that. And you still have to fight from like a rebate perspective.
They send you in the back door.
Yeah, send you in the back door. So just to comment on the launch prices, when you do the right thing, it's not always, rewarded on the back end.
Completely agree with that statement.
That's a
Thank
good
you for
point.
pointing that out.
Question over here. Pharmacogenetic testing. Any interest in that? Things that you've thought about as you talk with your employers?
So for our clients, we have some looking at it, but I think you just need to be mindful that you're not dumping out a bunch of pharmacogenetic tests, that it's going to the right patients to test for the right disease state. But they're super effective to make sure that you're getting someone on the right therapy right off the bat for certain types of cancer. But just to offer it up to all members to take a genetic test, that's obviously quite costly. So just making sure you do it with a thoughtful approach for the right certain disease states.
And just to clarify, I kind of put these into two camps. One, like the cancer. If there's a targeted drug for a protein, that is money well spent. We need to make sure that cancer cell has the target that we're using the drug for. But generally, when I hear pharmacogenomic therapy, it's usually the cytochrome P450 enzymes. And seeing how we metabolize drugs and drug-drug interactions. I'm trying to think of a less volatile word, but it feels a little bit like snake oil to me, because I don't see the actual practice of medicine changing as a result of it. So if you give me this test and you define that drug B is going to work the best for Mike Zuccarelli, and it's definitive, and you don't need to see me in a month or 3 months for a repeat visit, then perhaps there's value in it. But I think we're still seeing the current practice of medicine that I'm going to get you on this drug, but I still need to see you. I still need to monitor you. Again, you'll see them cite examples of very grave incidences where somebody's on a drug, ends up in the ER, ends up passing. I think that's a lot of headline hyperbole, and I'm not sure I see the value in it. Now, I will say one thing that I don't think gets a lot of attention are some of these like protein biomarker tests or gut microbiome tests. More of the general wellness, which I think most people would jump on and say, well, that sounds like snake oil. I think there's a lot of value in that a lot of us probably don't know what to eat, when to eat, how to eat, including myself, still trying to figure it out here in my 40s. I think that's something that we as a people should lean into. Now, again, whether we want to fund that as a plan sponsor, I don't know, but good question.
Another question?
So last week, I had a client bring up drug importation again. The Florida ruling, or the Florida being given permission by the FDA to, from a limited standpoint, albeit, import drugs, has now started raising this question again. So I'm curious if you have any additional, or because I know we've been talking about this for a decade now, but do we have any other new or maybe some unique insights as to what you advise your clients when they bring things like this up?
I'm happy to go because I've had a client. who's
Okay,
asked me
good.
about
I
it
do have
50
something, but go.
times. But yeah, so please chime in. But the first thing, I think it sounded great when the law was passed, but the other challenge is it's not just Florida okaying the drugs to come in. Canada has to be okay to provide their supply to us. And so that is our response, in addition to these pharmacies even being a part of the network. So maybe, and you could look at the FDA website, which also says you can't really do that on an individual basis, but as like an employer strategy to do it across your membership, like Canada's not willing to send it at scale at this time, and then the pharmacies aren't at the network. And also, if the FDA isn't enough and saying it's not okay at scale either, then talk to your compliance attorney as well to make sure they're comfortable.
And these are the draconian things that are going on. Like here you got Lilly in Indianapolis shipping a drug up to Ottawa to ship it back down to. The problem needs to be solved at a different level.
Yeah.
And as an aside, it's another thing that we've tried to pencil out. And there are a few drugs that, yes, it's massively cheaper to buy in other countries, but net of rebate,
And
a lot of them are
coupons.
pretty close.
Yeah. The only thing I would add, and this, I was going to mention this earlier with the patient assistance programs. I was with a broker last year, and we were talking about adding that for an employer. And he said, Chris, I get that this is not a long-term solution, but it's like the next vine that we can grab onto to go forward and cut some costs. And then the gravy train's going to run out. And the version of that in Canada is it doesn't scale, because eventually Canada says, hell no, we're not shipping our drugs down to you. But an individual employer can get away with it. But then what? Because eventually that will run out. So it's certainly not a long-term solution. And Mike's right. I mean, generics cost more in Canada. And with coupons and rebates, the juice might not be worth the squeeze, for sure.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, one more.
So much of PBM consulting is taking a look at the contracts that have been negotiated on behalf of these employers. If you're a plan sponsor sitting here today, after I leave this meeting, what should I look for in my contract that will give me the best bang for my buck to ensure the PBM's not ripping me off? Is there anything you'd look for? I'm looking for free consulting. Thank you.
For you, anything, Sam.
I'd say favorable termination language. This market changes too quickly to lock yourself into a long contract. And I can say that amongst our friends here that are hosting this event, I think everybody knows that that is fairly favorable here. But I can't tell you the number of times that I see contracts that are 3-5 year arrangements that are just painful.
Yeah.
Pass that plan sponsor name to me. I might give him a call.
Very good.
Well, I have an answer.
Oh,
Well, no, I thought this was the panel.
he needs more
three.
friends.
Okay.
All three. I'm sorry. Yes, please opine, Chris.
I will not opine, I promise. Generic, do you have a broken out generic guarantee for specialty?
Yeah.
If you don't, you should.
Great.
And that's a problem. And you'll end up like J&J. Probably not, but you could.
Very good. Good answer. Kim?
Yep, I agree with both. And also looking at your exclusions, it's not always a simple reprice and what the guarantees look like at a headline rate if they can come back and pull out half of those claims from the guarantee. So looking at the exclusions as well.
Excellent. Oh, got a question. Excellent. Wait for the mic. It's coming. Who's going to get there first? Okay, Alex. Well done.
All right, a bit of a two-part question here. One, does anybody have any strong opinions about those the transparent pass-through PBMs? And then number two, and I think we touched on it with that question back there, any sort of consideration for specialty carve-outs using an international sourcing vendor such as Sharks?
Well, I'm not a big fan of carving out specialty. If you want to go down that road, find a PBM that has the program bundled in. But I see those as just Band-Aids, ultimately, whether it's international sourcing or patient assistance programs. Let's put those together. What was the first part of your question again? Sorry, now I got it.
Transparent.
Oh, yeah.
Transparent
Pa-
pass-through.
Yeah,
PBM.
pass-through deals.
Yeah. You need to look at reprice the claims, but then think about the incentives. And the thought experiment, I get people and say, look, when a PBM gives you a guaranteed rebate amount, the next year if they're negotiating with the manufacturer and the manufacturer says, well, I can drop the drug price or I can increase the rebate, they're going to take that increased rebate every time. They have an incentive to. So incentives do matter, which is why we get into the PMPM discussion. But it is important to look into the details. It could be the carve-outs on the guarantee. But I like the idea that you're not chasing that higher cost drug, and the pass-through might say, we picked the Usimry at $1,000 because we're not hurt by AbbVie not paying us a rebate on Humira, which is what we want. So definitely worth considering.
Any other comments from the panel?
I can't help myself. But
So-
She can't help herself,
I
she
can't help
said. So she'll.
on the transparent, it's just tough for me because the word transparent is used so much. And just because transparent is in front of pass-through doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a lower net cost for your plan or your members. So, oftentimes, and not to say that there isn't a model where it does end up netting out lower, but making sure you look at what else is added into the administration fees, that may likely be much higher versus on a traditional spread model.
So it occurred to me during this panel, there were several references to the J&J lawsuit, and not everybody in the room may be aware of it because it was only filed about a month ago. And so I don't want people to walk away thinking that it has to do with a product. It's
the
not
tout.
not a drug-related lawsuit. So it's a breach of fiduciary duty. So it's a plan participant suing the plan. So those are my ERISA terms. Let me take the ERISA terms out. It's an employee suing the employer for breach of fiduciary duty. And it's a very interesting case. So for those plan sponsors in the audience, I would suggest you get a copy of the case and look at it because it is a very good reminder of whether you're an ERISA plan or a non-ERISA plan, you do have a fiduciary duty. And I think this case will be interesting to watch throughout the next few months.